again, welcome back. Here we are to continue talking about the weather app, and I thought what we'd do in this video is we would go back to this fetch weather function here and dig into this fetch operation, right? And we can kind of maybe talk more about what's happening here, right? And cover what this await keyword does and what the async keyword does, okay? So, so far we've got our weather app working. If I refresh, I can like type in a zip code here, 94115, and submit. Oh, looks like let's get the temperature in Fahrenheit there, right? 70 degrees, right? Nice. Okay, so everything is working, right? But what's happening underneath the hood here, right? So let's talk about this, right? So when you submit your form, you're going to call fetch weather, right? So we call this function, and that's what starts the whole process, right? So before you submit the form, right? Fetch weather is not doing anything. It's just a function up here waiting for us to call on it. Okay. Normally, when we call on a function, the computer executes every line of code one at a time, right? So it does one at a time here, okay? And it has to go through and do them all, okay? If it were to stop on one line of code, for example, like if we got to this fetch line right here, this is going to go out on the internet and load some data, and that could take some time. Think about it, like we have to send a request through the network. It's got to go through your Wi-Fi, system. It's got to go through your router. It's got to go through the phone line. It's got to go to somebody else's router and their computer, and then through multiple computer networks until it finds, the correct server, and then it's got to go through that server. And then if you think about it, like if this is trying to load some data from the internet, like how big is that data? Is it like a 52K file? Is it a 500K file? Is it a 500 megabyte file? Is it terabytes? We don't know, right? And depending on how large that file is, it could take some time. So no matter what, this is going to take some time, right? Doesn't have to be very long, but it could be a little bit of time to wait, right? And what happens if the server is not there, right? If the server is down or something's broken, it could take forever, right? Or we could get an error, and then what happens, right? So what is going on with this, right? So normally we can't stop here and wait for this to resolve, right? The computer doesn't do that. It goes every line of code at one at a time, and if it had to wait here, then the whole interface and our whole program would lock up, right? We wouldn't be able to click on anything. We wouldn't be able to submit another call here because our program would be stopped here, right? So how do we get around that, right? Well, you'll notice at the top here, fetch weather, I marked it with the async keyword. As soon as you put async in front of a function, that function is going to act asynchronously. Really, it also returns a promise, and maybe I'll cover that later. But for right now, let's just think about it as async functions can do the thing that functions normally don't do, right? It can stop at each line of code and wait for that line to resolve, okay? So normal functions don't do that, but async functions do, right? And where they stop is wherever you've put the await keyword, right? So, if I have an asynchronous function here and I go to the next line, then assigning this variable to the API key or this value to the API key variable, that doesn't wait. It just does that operation and we go to the next line. And then here we're going to assign this string to the path variable. So it just does those, right? Here on line 18, when we get here, we call fetch, we pass the path in, and then this operation is going to take some time to connect to the internet. And what fetch is going to do is it's going to return a response from the server, and the response isn't the data that we want, but it's a connection. It says, yeah, I connected to the server, like I found the server that you asked for at this particular location, and it's open and ready for work, what do you want to do next, right? And so we can use this response object to decide what to do next, right? So here we waited for that to happen, right? So we stopped here until this fetch request resolved. Really the way this works is fetch returns a promise, and you can use the await keyword on any line that has a promise on it. And what happens is we wait for that promise to resolve. So a promise is a JavaScript object, and it can be in one of three states. It can be pending, resolved, or rejected. If it's pending, then we wait on this line until it gets resolved. If it gets resolved, then we go to the next line, okay? And we get the value that it resolves to. So it resolved to a response. And on the next line here, I'm going to say response.json. And what this is doing is it's saying like, hey, you just made a connection to the server. Let's tell the server that we would like to stream the data that we requested with or as JSON. So I'm going to say, hey, response, let's stream the data as JSON. And now we have to wait for the data to actually be transferred to our computer, right? And so we have a wait here. So response.json returns a promise. So we're going to await for that promise to resolve, okay? And when the promise resolves, we'll have the actual JSON data that we loaded from the URL up here, okay? And then after that, we go on and we do everything else, right? Now, if I had a wait anywhere, we would wait on that line before doing anything, right? So here in this case, I can't do any of this code until the JSON is loaded, and I can't load the JSON until I get a response from the server. So we have to await the response, and then we have to await JSON, and then we can do all the code here, right? Again, if you're going to use await, you can only use it in a function that has this async keyword, right? And actually JavaScript will just give you an error straight up if you try to put await. It'll say await can only be used in functions that are marked async, right? And actually, it's kind of funny, the code hints are helping me, because if I select await, you can see it highlights async because they go together, okay? But anyway, so that was a quick discussion on, what is happening in here? Like, why did we set this up the way that we set it up? Yeah, so I guess that covers everything there. Thanks for watching. I hope that that's informative. If you've got any questions, feel free to post them to the comments.